Well, the top-level peace talks between US and Iran in Islamabad have failed, with US Vice President announcing that they are heading back to the US without any agreement. The talks, which were extended well beyond original schedule, went on for 21 hours before turning inconclusive.
At it now for 21 hours, and we've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement. And I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America. So we go back to the United States having not come to an agreement. We've made very clear what our red lines are, what things we're willing to accommodate them on, and what things we're not willing to accommodate them on. And we've made that as clear as we possibly could. And they have chosen not to accept our terms.
Well, the development has also been confirmed by Iranian state media, which said that Iran-US negotiations ended without an agreement. It further suggested that America's excessive demands prevented a common framework and agreement. Over the past 24 hours, discussions were held on topics including the Strait of Hormuz, nuclear issue, war reparations, lifting sanctions, complete end of war against Iran. Well, the Iranian state media has said that Iran repeatedly presented new initiatives and tried to invite the American side to be realistic. However, it prevented the achievement of a common framework at each round. Now, it further added that despite Pakistan's intervention early this morning, suggesting another round of talks and exchange of texts ended without a result due to the same American spirit. Well, the state media added that as long as the US does not agree to a reasonable deal, there will be no change in the situation in the Strait of Hormuz, adding that Iran is in no hurry for negotiations. Just minutes after his press conference, the US Vice President left Islamabad for Washington. Vance boarded Air Force 2 at 7:08 a.m. and waved to Pakistani officials from the top of the stairs. All right, to discuss this further, I'm now being joined live by Dr. Avner Cohen from Monterey, California, Professor of Non-Proliferation and Terrorism Studies, Middlebury Institute. Dr. Cohen, thanks so much for making time. Always a pleasure speaking with you. Let's start with the no deal. And clearly, all voices we've interacted with so far, no surprises that they could not reach a deal. In fact, that would have been a surprise had a deal been reached, given the background to which and on which both sides were approaching these talks. But just little over 2 hours or 3 hours ago, we were receiving reports that there is a round of talks scheduled for Sunday. And then we hear that statement from the Vice President. There's lots to unpack. Give me your assessment on this first.
Well, obviously, it appears that the two parties reached some kind of impasse. It was very much a signal of the United States to tell the Iranians, you're just too far with your demands and you must go down. There is still time. I mean, the ceasefire, fragile as it may be, has 2 weeks. So this is first round, and I think the U.S. signal is very, very strong. We're not going to waste our time and to try to get you in some kind of negotiation. If you're not going, we have a certain red lines. And if we are that far, we have to leave. And that message was very, very clear. I think the expectation or the hope, the American hope, is that it would require the Iranians to have some kind of rethinking, revisiting. My own sense is that Iranians are quite stubborn and they quite have a sense that they have not lost the war. They were able to survive. This is a very much asymmetrical war. And they're ready to absorb again because the regime has survived. So it's a kind of difficult situation. We'll see whether the U.S. signal, to what extent it would be received in Tehran.
All right. Now let's look at the Strait of Hormuz, Dr. Cohen, because that's very much still remains within the Iranian fold. Perhaps that gives them the large leverage to remain stubborn in these talks as well. I'll just quickly, for the sake of our viewers, go over the statement that is coming from the Iranian embassy in Ghana. And basically, a lot of the statements that have come in from the Iranian leadership or the current Iranian leadership there, it comes from their embassies as well. They've been largely active throughout this conflict in giving out rebuttals and retorts and giving back responses in a similar language. In the latest, they've just put it, this was 15-20 minutes back, that the US flew their vice president halfway across the world. They demanded everything they couldn't achieve through war. and the strait is still closed, and these are the key points in that post. At this point, during these talks, while they were continuing, there were multiple reports of warships, and the CENTCOM agreed to 2 warships that they were sending through the Strait of Hormuz. What kind of a trust-building process is this when the Strait of Hormuz remains a key issue in these talks and US warships are trying to trespass, and eventually, trespass would not be the right word, but I would say those ships are moving past that Strait of Hormuz when that strait remains Iran's key ask?
Well, I think it's very symbolic, and to a degree also practical. I think the U.S. Moved in the area close to the Omanian border, the Omanian side of these straits, to show that they can move, they are not facing any opposition, and to signal to others that they can follow. We will see in the coming days whether others will follow in that path. Also, I think the United States started with some operations to remove mines, to remove sea mines that the Iranian dropped earlier, and apparently they do not have the exact sites or they are unable to remove them. So I think it could move into a confrontation, but as of now, obviously the Iranians did not shoot anything at the U.S. destroyers, and they have passed back and forth. We'll see. There is a great deal of symbolism and showing off in those moves.
Understood. But does that reflect that the U.S. is still approaching these negotiations from a position of strength in terms of what they would like to achieve in these negotiations, that we're laying down the terms, this is the best we offer you, you agree to this, and after that, if you do not agree, if you do not abide, then that's the end of it? Because there were reports, and I'll just go back to that there was a round scheduled for later today, and then we hear that the American delegation has already headed back.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this was the sticking point that led to the explosion of the impasse of the negotiation at this point. I think there was, from the very beginning, the U.S. said that a ceasefire will be made under the condition that the Strait of Hormuz will be opened. The Iranians did not agree to that, and yet ceasefire was open. So I think there is some kind of unclarity about that. The U.S. wanted to test it. They did with the movement of the destroyers. I think the Iranians may have been opposed, and the issue remains unclear. As of now, I understand it very, very small. There is army of nearly 200 tankers and other ships waiting to cross the straits. Very few of them of friendly country with Iran cross, I understand, on the side close to Iran. So this is very much a sticking point.
Understood. As of now, after those 21 hours, Dr. Cohen, are we any further than where we were 21 hours ago or 24 hours ago? And also, just give me your assessment on when the Strait of Hormuz becomes the key sticking point, or one of the most important sticking points here. And this was not an issue before 6 weeks or 6 weeks back.
Yeah.
Does that mean that there were better chances of a solution before this war even started? It's only made it worse?
In a way, that's the case. I mean, this is completely a new problem. My understanding is that both Israel and the United States did think about the Strait of Hormuz in their planning, but they did not see the urgency of these problems. They thought, as I understand, that knocking down the leadership in Tehran would take time for Iranians to take strategic decisions, such as closure of the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians were able to do it very fast. The United States and Israel were surprised, in particular the United States, and the result is that economic crisis, which is looming, not only Europe, but also the United States. So this is a real problem. That problem was supposed to be resolved with a ceasefire, and even here there is no resolution.
Dr. Cohen, and as we were talking about before, as we were talking earlier about how U.S. military warships, those aggressive postures during the talks is a message, it's symbolism, and it's more than that as well. It's perhaps setting a precedent. But at the same time, as I spoke to you about how the Iranian embassies have been putting out statements, before we really hear from the higher echelons in the Iranian government, let me just quickly take this one point. This is again another post. This one's come from Iran in Japan, that is, and they've mentioned that it should be noted that throughout this process, the provocations were initiated by the other side, not by Iran. And that movement of those warships repeatedly through the Strait of Hormuz can't be lost in this point. Now, this is a case that Iran is again going to draw. It seems to be heading in that direction, that even in these talks, there was an aggressive posture from the US. And while there were talks of another round scheduled for Sunday, the US walked out. I think that's the case that's going to get built around this. Do you see it that way?
Not exactly. I see it the way that the U.S. had to show that the condition that was promised, that is to say, opening the Strait of Hormuz, can be tested and at least can be demonstrated that U.S. war ships could do that. So I think it was very much to show in America that the very condition that was a precondition, in fact, for the ceasefire is indeed achieved. So obviously there is a gap in the interpretation and the understanding of the situation. It just showed that how much the preparation for the ceasefire were not even fully cooked. It was cooked in such a way that there is misunderstanding about the very basic terms, such as the Strait of Hormuz.
Dr. Cohen, I'll have to just quickly go back to those reports that came out from the Financial Times and also from the New York Times, suggesting that it was the American leadership that had practically dictated that post that came out from the Pakistani Prime Minister's post on X, and which the first draft of that post, after being posted, read draft message for the Pakistani Prime Minister, and then there was the message. The second draft of it had that line removed. It was changed within 30 seconds. 12:46 a.m. I think that was the local time in Pakistan when that post was put out. And in the tags, there was Donald Trump, there was JD Vance, there was Steve Witkoff, and then there's Marco Rubio. And then the third version of that comes out just 1 minute later. Why I'm giving stress on that post is that's essentially where the talks for a ceasefire even started before the US agreed to it. And then there's a final version of it where they change the order of the tags. They have Marco Rubio above Steve Witkoff. Now, all these minor changes, and of course that big change in the first line, that indicates what the Financial Times and the New York Times are also hinting at in their report. Do you feel the US was as desperate for a ceasefire as Iran?
Yes, I do. I think that Donald Trump did not have the guts to carry out what he promised he's going to do. He promised to do incredible bombing, what he calls civilization, to be demised, and he was obviously not ready to do that. He needs to have some kind of pretext, justification not to do so. And that's what we saw. Indeed, it was announced, I believe, 20 or 25 minutes before the official deadline. So I think your reading is correct.
Understood. And Dr. Cohen, if we look forward, now, where do things go now?
Well, I expect that would be another round. It not necessarily will be in Pakistan. It's for the US side, it's like 15 hours flight time. That's a lot. There is a geographical problem for the Iranians. It's difficult for them to fly west. They can fly easily east towards Pakistan. So I do not know where it's going to be taking place. Maybe Oman again. But I don't think that would be the end of this. I think much of the time will still be. It was a signal, strong signal, but I think the negotiation would be resumed. That's my guess.
And that signal, Dr. Cohen, there's already been an Iranian response to that. The IRGC said that they will be dealing a severe response if the Americans try that again. Of course, we'll keep the statements aside, but till now, if we've seen Iran say something, they followed up on it too. They said, we'll attack all your bases in West Asia, they did it. They said, we'll lock up Strait of Hormuz, they did it. They said, we'll go after your main technology firms, Oracle, Amazon, their databases, they were attacked, Bahrain and another Gulf region. Along with that, the negotiations that we were talking about, they've tried Oman, they've tried Switzerland, they've tried Pakistan. Where else do they really need to go and meet at this point, unless they really sit and don't get up till a conclusion is achieved?
Well, first I would, to a degree, correct you. Certain things they promised to do and they did not do. For example, they say they're not going to sit with the American as long as the issue about the few $1 billion which are frozen in Oman or in Kuwait, I'm not exactly sure, will be released. That has not been released. They also said something about the Lebanon thing, that the Lebanon must be ended. The Lebanon's fighting against Hezbollah must be ended. This was not the case. Yes, Israel somewhat eased and did not attack Beirut itself, but Israel continued to attack other places in Lebanon. So certain threats by the Iranians were not carried out, and indeed they did sit for the negotiations. I think both sides realized that they would like to continue to negotiate, so I don't think that's what happened today, the departure of the U.S., it's the end of the story.
All right, Dr. Cohen, I think there is more to discuss in terms of developments. We'll need to really wait for the higher echelons in the Iranian government to come out with a statement. As of now, it only seems to be in a deadlock, but it seems both sides need to continue these talks, and that only seems fair to both sides and to the larger global good at this point, as Strait of Hormuz remains in some kind of a flux at this point. We'll need to wait and see how this one goes forward. That was Dr. Cohen speaking with us. Always a pleasure, Doctor.
A pleasure too.